Thank you very much. Madam Rajavi, distinguished guests, all of you who have come here, it's a great honor to be here on behalf of this very important and urgent cause. I begin with a quote because when I was being interviewed earlier, I was asked, why am I here? So I could think of no better answer than the following quotation from a very famous poem by John Donne, an English clergyman and poet of the 16th and 17th century. No man is an island entire of itself. Each man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less. It goes on to say, any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind. And therefore, never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. I think John Donne expressed what is now centuries and centuries old fight for freedom. When one man's freedom is taken away, when one woman's freedom is taken away, when groups of men and women's freedom are taken away, then our freedom is taken away. We're all in peril, we're all in danger. There are times in which the world has not recognized that connection, that plight. We've seen tremendous tragedies in the last century and the one before. And we are witnessing that right now. First of all of you are on the right side of history. All of you, meaning Madam Rajavi, her organization, all of you that are here, all the heroes at Camp Liberty who had been at Camp Ashraf, you're all on the right side of history. Because what are you doing? You're fighting for freedom. You're fighting for liberty. You're fighting for the dignity of the human being. The people on the wrong side of history, the Ayatollah, the mullahs, Rouhani, before him Ahmadinejad, and then unfortunately the appeasers and the enablers who allow them to accomplish what they're doing. I wish we were 20 years from now or 30 years from now and we can look back on this, because the sacrifices of these brave people at Liberty and before that at Ashraf, that's going to be the blood and the thing that creates the new Iran. But we are where we are right now, and we have to deal with the problems that we have right now. So let's begin with what the MEK stands for. Madam Rajavi outlined it, but it's worth repeating. This organization stands for a democratic alternative to a regime of terror, a regime far worse than the regimes that have been overthrown in that region, worse than Gaddafi's, worse than Mubarak's, even worse than Assad's. This is a regime that has supported terrorism all over the world. Strangely, even though my country is negotiating with this regime, my country considers this regime the biggest sponsor of terrorism in the world. The biggest sponsor of terrorism in the world. So the MEK stands as an alternative to that, a democratic alternative, an alternative that is seeking free elections, rights for women, a secular government, respect for human rights, and a non-nuclear Iran. These are all things we embrace. These are all things decent people all over the world embrace. Madam Rajavi's leadership of this organization and this cause has been nothing short of heroic. She's a woman who pursues 24 hours a day all of these causes. And let's look at the history of this organization. This organization surrendered its arms in 2002, 2003, when the United States invaded Iraq to the United States. Each and every person at liberty and now at Ashraf and now at liberty, including the people who have been slaughtered, have a piece of paper signed by my government promising them protection. These are protected persons under the United Nations. These are people given protection by the United States of America. And I believe they're caught up in it in two different ways. I believe part of the reluctance of my government in living up to its promise to protect all of these people is a misguided notion that it will offend Iran if it does so, and it will interfere with the negotiations. Iran agreed before to not go forward with its nuclear program. It agreed to inspections before. That's what we're talking about now, isn't it? We're talking about they're not going forward with their nuclear program and having inspections. Well, Iran agreed to that before. And America and the West accepted it. Turned out Iran was lying. Iran was cheating. The Ayatollahs were lying. Rouhani was lying. He even explains it clearly in his memoirs. All you have to do is read it. If you can read, you read it. He'll explain to you that they fooled America and they fooled the West. While they were saying we're not going to go forward with nuclear weapons, in various parts of Iran, they were enriching uranium. Now, who discovered that? Who found out about that? Who was able to reveal the lie that was being perpetrated by the Ayatollah, by Rouhani, by the government at the time? The MEK. Your organization revealed that. Not on one occasion, not on two occasions, but on three occasions. It revealed for the world to see that, in fact, while Iran was saying we're not going forward with our nuclear program, they were, in fact, going forward, full speed ahead. Iran does not want to make that mistake again. Iran doesn't want to make the mistake of agreeing to not going forward with their nuclear program and then getting caught doing exactly what they intend to do. At some point, when it's convenient for them, at some point when they need more sanctions reduced, at some point when they need more concessions from the West, they are going to agree to not going forward with their nuclear program. They're going to agree to inspections. And they're going to cheat, just like they did before. But this time, they don't want the MEK or other people similarly situated to be able to pull the curtain open and explain to the world what they're doing. And that's why these people are in such grave danger today. Remove as many of them as possible inside Iran, in Iraq with the help of the Iraqi government. In doing that, also create a climate of fear so that no one else would think of doing what these brave people did back in 2002 and 2003 and 2005 in revealing the lies of the regime. And they're going forward with this program because they learned the mistake they made in the past. On the other hand, we don't seem to have learned the mistake we made in the past. We don't seem to have learned that we trusted them once before and they double-crossed us. We don't seem to have learned that we trusted them before, and not only did they go ahead with their nuclear program, but the man that we consider a reformer was at the core of that. He was the one who is proud of the fact that he fooled us. And we're going to let him fool us again. Because of the sanctions, because of the increased nature of the sanctions, We all know the Iranian government was in grave danger. Its economy was shattered. They had to do something. They had to make some kind of an attempt to relieve the enormous pressure of these sanctions. These sanctions were working. We should have let them continue to work to overthrow the regime. We should have made them work so that we could push the regime to the point where it completely renounced nuclear weapons. And a new regime could take its place that would live up to its promises. But instead of doing that, because we wanted to say that we had some kind of an agreement, whether it was a worthwhile agreement or not, we entered an interim agreement with them. This interim agreement has enormous problems. The 6 United Nations resolutions, including the most recent one, have all been to prevent Iran from having nuclear power. Whether they have it for peaceful purposes or they don't have it for peaceful purposes, their regime can't be trusted to have nuclear power. For that reason, the UN passed 6 resolutions prohibiting them from having any form of nuclear power. It makes no sense to allow a regime with the history of this regime to have any form of nuclear capacity. The negotiations have to end up this way. None. No nuclear capacity for this regime so long as this is the regime running Iran. None. Zero. This organization that runs Iran is an organization that is engaged in fomenting terror all over the world. To give them the legitimacy of reaching an agreement with them without recognizing that there should be a legitimate effort at regime change is another terrible, terrible mistake. The thing that has to be separated here are the mullahs, the ayatollahs, the Rouhanis, the Ahmadinejads on the one hand, and the Iranian people on the other, who are a people with a great tradition, a great civilization, a great history, wonderful values, and a great heart, and enormously productive citizens every place they go. In my country, there are strong Iranian communities all throughout the United States, many of them who had to flee with nothing and then rebuilt in a matter of months and years. These are wonderful people, strong people. It's the reason I know that the overthrow of this regime is going to come about sooner rather than later. Madam Rajavi lives with this day in, day out. I've come to know her very, very well. I have enormous respect for her. I wish, I pray, that my country would live up to its promise. My country should be sending airplanes to Iraq. We've got an enormous military. We've got a tremendous air force. We could liberate those people in a day and transfer them to the U.S. That's what should be done. And all I ask you to think about for a moment is just a few days before the Berlin Wall fell, people thought it would be there for another 50 years. And just 2 weeks ago, no one would have thought that the leader of the Ukraine would flee the Ukraine. Just a few weeks ago. I read an article actually written 3 days ago saying, well, he certainly is strong enough to remain. He may be weakened, but he's strong enough to remain. That article was written in a magazine that unfortunately was published on the very day that he fled for the magazine, fortunately for everyone else. These things happen very quickly when they happen. These things always involve meaning the fall of a regime that is built on tyranny, murder, oppression, terrorism, and horror. Because it's a very weak foundation, because it's amassed enormous numbers of enemies over the years, many of whom are just afraid to step forward. But all of a sudden, if one steps forward, and two and three, and then everybody can step forward. So this can happen. And in this case, unlike Egypt, unlike even Libya, and certainly unlike Syria, where we don't know what we're going to get if we overthrow this regime, we know what we're going to get here. We're going to get a regime, we're going to get an organization and help guide it that believes in democracy, rights for women, a non-nuclear Iran, a regime of law and order, a regime that fits into exactly what all the good governments of the world stand for. So we don't have to guess here. This can happen. Just think of the things that are happening in the world. See what just happened in the Ukraine. And because of what you're doing, it's going to happen in Iran. I can't tell you the day. I can't tell you the hour. I can tell you it's going to happen. And when it happens, everyone's going to be shocked. Everyone's going to say, we never thought it could happen. But it can happen because all the same elements are there. And you have extraordinarily handled yourselves to gain the respect of the world. I leave with, once again, words to the people who have the most at stake here, the people at liberty. We're with you. There are many, many in my country, in Norway, all over the world that have so much respect for you. You're not going to be forgotten. We are not going to let you down. And as long as we have voices, those voices are going to be raised to seek for you and for your people what you deserve. Freedom, democracy, decency, and an Iran that lives up to its tradition and history. Thank you, and God bless you.